Hello, BookTube. A while ago, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club did an unusual tag involving yours truly. He made a tag and looked around the library in his tiny house and said, which of these books is it possible that Steve hasn't read? As I've mentioned on this channel before, that not only have I been reading for a very long time, but I read an enormous amount. I read very fast, and I give it huge amounts of hours every day. It's most of when you're not seeing me. Most of what I'm doing, by far, is just laying there reading. And that means a lot of books. That adds up to a lot of books. And Matthew was wondering, if I go through my books, what are the chances that Steve hasn't read X, Y, and Z? So he made, has Steve read it? Has Steve Donoghue read this book as a tag? And his own total was two. Two of the 8 books that he mentioned I have not read. And people like the tag. it has kept going, and that is fantastic. That is fine by me. That is fine by me. I am hearing about a whole lot of books, and I'm hearing about a different kind of book in a way than booktubers often talk about. Books that are maybe far off the beaten track, or maybe more personal, and that is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I love it. So one by one, I didn't make a video response to Matthew's original video. I will. But one by one, I have been making video responses to people who do this challenge, not just to tell them how they did, but also to tell them a little bit about what I thought about the books that they mentioned. And the all-important number of books that Steve has not read has varied, but only slightly. 8 to 10 books thereabouts on your list. We've had a number of different entries here, and then the number was at 2, and then it stayed at 2, then it briefly went up to 3, and then back down again, and now the champion is Hannah at Hannah's Books at 4 books that I haven't read, including one of hers. But the entrants keep on coming, and so we will see if her reign can be challenged. So today I have a lot of these to do, so I haven't done yours yet. Have patience. I will get to it. Today we're doing one from a booktuber called Readerwoman. And I'm not sure that I caught on her video what her real name is, if she even gives it. So I'm just going to refer to her as Readerwoman, since it's a mighty cool name anyway. And we'll just get right to her nominees here. And the first one is a classic. It's Kabloona. I can no more pronounce this name than she could. It's by Gontran de Poncins, the Poncins. But it's an epic travel narrative, and she held up the actual edition that I had it in. I've mentioned this edition on this channel before. Those old Time Life trade paperbacks that were made with rationed paper and sort of a burnt cardboard, a stiffened cardboard front and back cover. They're made really cheaply, really poorly. So usually one dot of ink, and the covers weren't built to age. So after a couple of years, they became brittle. So that, as Readerwoman says in her very tag, you have to break it to read it. She puts it succinctly like that, and that's exactly true. You have to break these things to read them. And I read it. I read Kabloona, of course, in that edition. I didn't really like it, but I have a sweet tooth for travel memoirs, because once upon a time I had a sweet tooth for travel. I can't really recommend Kabloona as a reading experience, but sooner or later somebody will reprint it if they haven't already. I mean, it had an enormous print run. It was a popular book. Then the next one I'm not. There's always one book, at least one book on the list where I'm just mystified as to what the person was thinking. As to even vaguely thinking that I might not have read the book in question. There's at least one book on every list that's like that, and this one I think probably counts, although there are a couple of other candidates. The next one is King Solomon's Ring by Konrad Lorenz, which was also made in one of those Time Life trade paperbacks, but thank God it's been made in other editions as well, including a mass market paperback with cover art by an artist who went on to become an absolute industry standard for fantasy novels. And it's a series of interconnected, natural history meditations on various kinds of animals, including dogs, preciously, beautifully dogs. And of course I read it. It was a million bestseller. It was everywhere. Everybody talked about it. I have read everything by Konrad Lorenz. Then the next one is another example of something that it's probably, you could probably assume that I've read it, and I have. It's Reveille in Washington by Margaret Leech, who was the Reveille in Washington won the Pulitzer Prize, and it was the first. I believe she was the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for history. And I liked Reveille in Washington quite a bit. It also was in a Time Life trade paperback. I think I read it first in that edition because I think I had a subscription to those things long time ago. I think I had a subscription. But it isn't my favorite by the thought. My favorite, I've shown this on this channel before. This is In the Days of McKinley, which is an absolutely brilliant presidential study. Just absolutely brilliant. In fact, this also won Margaret Leech the Pulitzer Prize. She won 2. So she was the first woman to win for history and the first woman ever to win twice, I believe. But certainly the first woman to win twice for history. And this, I think, better than Reveille in Washington, gives you a feel for the kind of prose that this author can write, and it's amazing. It's rolling and incredibly intelligent and poised and balanced on its own periods and movements. It's the kind of prose that I am implicitly talking about whenever I bring up Dude Bro Lit on this channel, because someone who reads Dude Bro Lit, who has addicted themselves to it and reads nothing else, has lost the ability to read this book. I don't mean to read it and like it. I mean to read it at all. They've lost the ability to rejoice in prose like this, and that is a deep shame to me. I feel sorry that is true. And of course, Margaret Leech is not the only author who writes like that. That people like that, people who want to read just video games, they have eroded their ability to read stuff like this. So, one, they are missing out on 90% of written prose in English, and 2, the market will respond, and books like this will stop appearing, except for university presses. One way or another, I strongly recommend Margaret Leech. She's not in print now. I doubt that anyone will. Maybe somebody might reprint Reveille in Washington, because that was a huge deal. Nobody will ever reprint In the Days of McKinley, and that's a shame. But if you can find a copy, it often shows up in library sales and yard sales and whatnot, along with In the Shadow of Burning Grove, another great presidential book, but of a different era. No one's ever going to reprint it because the money and the contract is going to go to someone who writes a new book on McKinley. Someone just did. Someone wrote a very, very good new standalone biography of President McKinley. But that leaves this even further in the distance, and it's probably the kind of book that your library will de-access. So it probably won't even be there. But if you want a really atmospheric, just wonderfully done presidential book, you should give it a try. Try and find it. The next one is more to travel writing. This is Speak to the Earth by Vivienne de Watteville, and it's travel writing in darkest Africa. It's from 100 years ago. It's her on safari in Africa, killing everything that moves, and all the people that were on safari with her killing everything that moves. And the strong implication being, in the course of the book, the subtext behind everything you read in the book, is that the everything that moves that gets killed would also very much include the native bearers if they stepped out of line. It's just it's beautifully written. It's a beautifully written book. Readerwoman compares it to Elspeth Huxley. Of course, Elspeth Huxley's books, The Flame Thieves of Thika especially, is infinitely better written. It put a huge smile on my face when Readerwoman said she loves Elspeth Huxley's books, because she should. Everyone should read them. Everyone should. It compares somewhat to that, except that it's soaked in blood. The Speak to the Earth, her first book, is soaked in blood. You never see a beautiful description of an animal without that beautiful description ending with the animal being blown to smithereens. And that wears a bit. That might not have worn a bit on the sentimentality of the time when the book came out, although there were plenty of us then who said you don't have to kill animals to appreciate their beauty. There were plenty of people then that did. But plenty of people loved this book, thought it was absolutely beautifully written. So do I. I don't think I could bear to read it again. But especially since almost all of the animals that are blown to bits in this book are now on the edge of extinction. They're now on the edge of being gone forever. That's pretty rough and pretty stark in the course of only one generation or two. But critics, fans of hers, some high-profile fans of hers, some fellow writers, urged her to write another book and maybe ease off on the bloodshed, maybe ease off on the hunting, and just and accentuate the other active element of the book, which is the beautiful descriptions of the world. And she did that. She wrote a book called Out in the Blue. Oh no, Out in the Blue was the first book. There's just such boring titles. I get them mixed up. Out in the Blue was the first book. Speak to the Earth is the second one. Speak to the Earth is the result of all of those people reading Out in the Blue. And Speak to the Earth is far more meditative. It's far more personal. It's far more beautiful. And some of its meditations on African elephants are amazingly good. Just amazingly good. I've spent a lot of time walking around. I spent a lot of time walking around the scrub in Africa. You can't avoid the reality of elephants. And although when you're on foot with your dogs and a rucksack full of books, it's impossible to look on an elephant encounter in quite the New Age way that we do in the 21st century from a Land Rover with a roof full of guides with rifles. When you encounter an elephant on foot with your dogs in the middle of nowhere, it's impossible to look on that moment with New Age kind of, oh, isn't this beautiful? Because they're absolutely terrifying. They're absolutely terrifying. No video that you can watch prepares you for their size and for the immediacy of their power. No video representation does. You have to meet one in person to do that. And meeting one in person on their own turf when you are completely vulnerable is those moments stand in my memory, but not as happy moments. But even then, even thinking that, even considering that, you can look back in your memories and see these things are unbelievably beautiful and unbelievably complex and personal. And a lot of that comes out in the second book, which I got them mixed up. But Out in the Speak to the Earth is the one that Readerwoman praises, and it's the one that I praise as well. It's Out in the Blue that's a little hard to take, but I have read both. I've read both, and I think I've read Speak to the Earth more than once because I think it was reprinted. I can't quite remember the edition that Readerwoman held up, but I think it got a paperback reprint, so I think I read it twice. Then the next one, is sometimes these Has Steve read it videos come with little quick predictions because you all watch me every day and you get a good sense of what I like and don't like. And the next one is At Swim Two Birds by Flann O'Brien. And Readerwoman said you probably hated it. And the reason that she anticipated that I would hate this book is because on the surface it seems like the same kind of postmodern experimentation as James Joyce's Ulysses, which I absolutely hate. And I don't hate At Swim Two Birds at all. In fact, I think it's genius. And the reason why is very simple. It's because some experiments fail and others succeed. At Swim Two Birds is the successful James Joyce's Ulysses, where all the things that Joyce does wrong, all the indulgences that he just lets go of in that book are controlled. And the language is prettier. So I have read At Swim Two Birds. I've read it a few times, and I like it very much. It's not an easy read, but I recommend it. I recommend all of Flann O'Brien. And then the next one is by Ella Berthoud and Susan Elderkin, and it's a really great, really fun book. It's also it's the novel Cure, where they sort of tongue-in-cheek say, here's a list and page-by-page appreciations of a whole bunch of novels that'll cure what ails you. Not just, I mean, they facetiously say they'll cure a broken heart and a broken leg. But the book's main point is that sometimes novels are exactly what we need. And that they really can turn around a mood, they really can turn around a day. I agree with that completely. And I love compendiums like this that just go through various books. You read through it wondering, okay, what would I have included? And which of these would I have taken out? And those are lots and lots of fun. I think I don't have currently a copy of the novel Cure. I kind of wish I did, but it will show up at the Brattle Bookshop. And then the last book was the most touching in Readerwoman's video. The last book in her video was wonderful, as all of these have been, but her last book was the one that brought out to the greatest degree a thing that I have seen in these Has Steve Read It editions, which is people not just talking about books they think I might not have read, but occasionally one or two of those books on their list they make a special plea for, not just to me, but to all of you. They make a special plea. They say, all right, I don't know if he's read this book or not, but I had to include it on this list because... And then typically what follows after that in these videos is a kind of a tone of voice, an attitude towards a particular book that I almost never see on BookTube. I'm not even sure that I can quite identify what it is, but it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I got it here in this video with this book. It's Gertrude Stein, and Readerwoman has a great quote. She says, quite simply, nobody likes her. And this is true. Gertrude Stein has a reputation as being a genius, but is not liked by the reading public. She's not liked by students. The one time I tried to teach her, they hated her. Absolutely hated her. Readerwoman put forward a great hypothesis as to why that might be true, that maybe it did her some harm, that she had so much success, so much money, that she could view her writing projects as sort of larks, that maybe that was the case, and that maybe if she had been a little bit harder worked, her work might have been better. I think that's fascinating. It could very well be true. But it's not Alice B. Toklas that Readerwoman mentions for her Gertrude Stein. Her whole, I'll leave a link to her video down below. Watch the whole thing, but when you get to the end, prepare to love the ending, because her advocacy for this author is just the most wonderful thing. But it isn't Alice B. Toklas that she recommends. It's everybody's autobiography. And, you know, I have to agree. I thought Alice B. Toklas was mannered. I thought that it presumed ahead of time that it was going to impress me, and therefore stopped working to impress me, and wanted to impress me, which is kind of a seedy thing for a book to want in the first place. Everybody's autobiography struck me as completely different. I read it, I think I've only read it once. I read it years and years ago, long before Readerwoman was born. I read it, and my first thought, I checked in my reading journal, my first thought when I was finished was that if everything this author wrote read like this, she would be my favorite author. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But Readerwoman is entirely right. Everybody's Autobiography is a terrific book to read. I have read it, but it's a terrific book to read. So I want to recommend it as well. I don't know if it's in print. Like I said, Gertrude Stein is not liked. Readerwoman is correct when she says nobody likes her. And it's teachers, it's students, it's publicists, it's publishers. Nobody likes her. I don't know why. We're due, I think, for a revisionary 800-page biography of Gertrude Stein and new editions of a handful of her works, maybe with new introductions, new look. She was a trailblazer in a lot of ways. Her prose is interesting in a lot of ways. We might be due for that in 2020 or 2021. But anyway, it was a grand finish to a grand video, and I have lots of these others to do. If I haven't done yours yet, again, I will get to it. But you're probably wondering how the stats are. You're probably wondering how Fight Night ended up. Well, if you were paying attention at home, you realize there were no no's on this list. I have read all of these books. So although Readerwoman crafted one of the most charming videos in this viral tag thing, she also had the lowest number of books that Steve has not read. That's good. That means that she and I are on the same wavelength. Actually, that might not be good for her. Be a lot of work for her psychiatrist or her team of them. But because you wouldn't want to go into a psychiatrist's office and say, "Oh, at least I'm on Steve's wavelength." they'd be writing you out a prescription right away. But anyway, that does it for her tag, and her tag does not challenge even the lowest number. She doesn't even get to 2, much less 3 or 4. So those of you who are keeping track of this grand corrida, Hannah at Hannah's Books is still the Winnah and reigning Champeen. She is still doing the Rocky dance at the top of the steps at the Dawn in Philadelphia. So we're going to keep going with these. We'll see who does. We'll see who I do next. I have a list of them. We'll see. I think Peg at the History Shelf. I think she might be next. But there are a couple more that I need to do, and of course I am not forgetting to do Matthew's. There's the guy who started all this mess. He deserves one of his own. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That was an excellent tag that Readerwoman did, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.